So that's it? What, we some kind of suicide squad?
Well, we consider that term degrading. The official term is Task Force X.
These videos are not for children. If you are a children, then piss off.
Hey there, it's me, your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso. And being that my channel has somewhat become a haven for all things Batman related, those of you who watch it had to know that this video was coming. Now, truth zone here. When I first saw James Gunn's The Suicide Squad trailer, if I'm being honest, I was a little worried. I distinctly remember thinking that the 2016 Suicide Squad trailers were significantly more interesting, and they got me more invested in what the final product could be. You know, never mind the fact that the movie itself was a complete mismatched mess of studio interference and trailer baiting. The point is, the trailer worked. And yet, with this one, I was so completely indifferent to it. It just seemed like such a stale and boring presentation. But luckily, in both cases, the movie greatly contrasted with what the trailer presented. First things first, the Suicide Squad lives up to its name and premise. Here, we're shown how absolutely expendable the team is on these missions. We're shown some of the main cast die at random intervals throughout the movie, sometimes one right after the other. And we're not talking about some throwaway character placed in the background. Although, actually, I guess we also are in Milton's case, but we're also talking about some of the characters the movie spends a good chunk of its time establishing and developing. Some of the people billed as starring in this movie die before their names show up in the opening credits. I was very happy to see Pete Davidson bite the dust. So happy that it almost made me forget how disappointed I was in seeing Pete Davidson at all. James Gunn said previously that in this movie no one was safe. And boy oh boy is that a f***ing understatement. Despite how cartoonish and comedic these characters are, you always feel like they're in some real life danger. The fact that this movie comes with a body count, let alone the amount of bodies in said count, it really emphasizes the threat level. Midnight. But I also gotta talk about the King Shark in the room here. The first movie and this one have next to nothing in common, outside of a very similar title. Seriously, The Suicide Squad, that's how we're doing this? That's one hell of a naming convention you got there. I haven't been this underwhelmed with a sequel title since Fast and Furious. The fact that these two movies are still in the same continuity is kinda head-scratching, but luckily the movie does a good job of really towing the line between sequel and reboot. The tone and atmosphere is entirely different, and very few elements or mentions of what happened in the first movie are carried over and made here. It's not like it serves the narrative tremendously, it's almost like the first movie was some prequel DLC that you could have downloaded before you saw this one. Like, you understand the story a little bit more, but you really don't need it. But to me, the funniest thing about this movie is that a lot of people's issue with the first Suicide Squad movie was that it allegedly tried too hard to be Guardians of the Galaxy. Well, don't you worry, because Warner Brothers got your postcards. They got your letters. And they hired the director of Guardians of the Galaxy to put this one together. I think James Gunn did an incredible job at taking what worked from the first film and completely discarding what didn't, all while also putting his own unique personal touch on it. And he did so brilliantly. The only characters from the original Suicide Squad to make their way over into this one are Rick Flagg, Amanda Waller, Captain Boomerang, and of course, Harley Quinn. Because, let's face it, you're not going to sell anyone on the Suicide Squad without Harley Quinn. Everyone else in that squad is pretty much interchangeable, as this movie has shown. But if you want asses in seats, Harley needs to be front and center. Quite frankly, those four characters were my favorite performances in the first one. And just in case anyone's keeping score at home, Killer Croc and Deadshot, in that order, were my next two. And then I really didn't like anything else. Margot Robbie seems to get better and better in the role of Harley Quinn with each passing movie. Seriously, I wasn't sold on her at first. You know, I think I kind of felt that she lacked a lot of the depth that the character has. It seemed like there was an outline of the character that everyone knew, but the lines weren't colored in entirely. But man, she's come a long way. And despite her character being featured in different movies, with different directors, and different creative directions, she always manages to make her character development feel organic. Harley Quinn is a character that could very easily become comic relief with a hint of action ass-kicker. But the DCEU and Margot herself have done a really great job of showcasing both her comedic violent side, as well as her emotional fragility. She surprisingly doesn't get overexposed in this movie. I feel like we see just enough of her. Not too much to make the movie feel like Harley Quinn and Friends, like every other Harley Quinn movie in the DCEU has felt, but we're shown her just enough to justify the marketing behind the movie. Instead of making this a Harley Quinn movie, they made it a movie with Harley Quinn in it. Not Tom Hardy really gives a voice and a personality to an otherwise pretty bland character in Rick Flagg. And I think this movie does a better job at humanizing the character than the last one did. And that's despite the fact that the last movie gave him a love interest that motivated his every action. His past history with Bloodsport, his career with Amanda Waller, and even his compassion for Harley Quinn really shows the character as a man rather than just a mercenary. And because of all this, the character comes off as much more relatable and even likable in this movie. Which again, was not the case with the last one. I mean, it seems like they tried, but it was a swing and a miss. In The Suicide Squad, you actually root for Rick Flagg some of the time. You want to see him succeed in a way I don't think the audience did in the first Suicide Squad movie. Viola Davis perfectly personifies Amanda Waller. I really could just end the sentence there because that's honestly all that needs to be said. Anything you could want in this character, she performs. And does so with extreme conviction. In my opinion, her performance should be one of the most celebrated parts of all of the DCEU. I cannot sing this woman's praises enough. To no one's shock, I'm sure, she is again absolutely f***ing terrifying. And in my eyes, she's become the standard for this role. As far as I'm concerned, there's plenty of really good performances in this cinematic universe. But this one stands out maybe more than anyone else. Viola Davis is the definitive Amanda Waller. And I will be highly disappointed to see anyone else ever in the future take on this role. You know, it didn't happen yet, and I'm already ready to riot. That shit is blasphemy. And Courtney, let me tell you something about Courtney. I f***ing hate Courtney in everything I've ever seen him in. The man is the oatmeal of acting. He comes across like a discount Sam Worthington. The guy is Hollywood's wallflower. As in, you'll probably forget he exists shortly after seeing him. If you ever played a game where you can customize a character, he's the character before you actually customize him. We're talking about default the actor. However, that's not the case in these movies. I've never seen Courtney give so much of a fuck and perform in the manner which he did when he's wearing his hipster beanie and looking like Lemmy from Motorhead. What can I say? I love this man when you put him in a trench coat. He somehow has evaded his own suckishness and completely recreated himself. And I'll be real with you, the guy was probably my second favorite part of the first Suicide Squad movie. Which may be a surprise to you, but it was especially a surprise to me. So imagine my upset when in the opening scene, he along with most of the squad are killed in a mission gone wrong. I was devastated.
Look how they massacred my boy.
We were so close to repairing our tattered relationship that you didn't know we had. So close. But on the other hand, the immediate burial of an established character sets the tone of uncertainty this movie's trying to encapsulate. The new inclusions to Task Force X are fantastic additions, and I don't know that there's even so much as one that feels out of place or otherwise unnecessary. They all serve a purpose and they all serve a role, even if that role was just to show us that some of them could and probably will die. Idris Elba, who's my boy, by the way, in my top 5 actors alive today. Idris Elba plays Bloodsport. Now, it was rumored since the beginning that he was taking over the role of Deadshot, and I'm really glad to see that that wasn't true. You see, Will Smith was originally signed on to reprise his role, but then there were some scheduling conflicts, and it became pretty much impossible for him to show up to the shoot. It was nice of the WB and James Gunn to keep Will's seat at the table reserved, you know, rather than just handing it off to the next guy. I mean, you can kind of tell from the structure of the story and this character's place in it that the format was probably originally developed for Deadshot. But in my opinion, the fact that this isn't Deadshot works more in this movie's favor. Deadshot's presence would have probably added too much of a familiarity to the viewers of the past movie, and maybe even too much familiarity with the cast. The fact that most of these characters hadn't met or worked together prior to these events makes things more interesting. It allows them to form bonds and rivalries within their rankings, instead of having a movie insist on some previous history that you need to know that happened prior to the events of this movie. The fact that this isn't Deadshot also made way for a completely different dynamic between this assassin and his daughter. They aren't on great terms. His daughter is actually really ashamed of him. While there's still love there, it's masked by immaturity on both parties and a little bit of resentment. I don't know that we'll ever see this character again. I can't imagine that he'll play some major role in future installments, but I thoroughly enjoyed watching his journey and taking it for what it was. And by the end of his arc, you feel like the character has grown and evolved and matured, going from a selfish, reluctant inclusion to the team to a mostly selfless leader of a pack. John Cena's Peacemaker carries out tasks and completes missions with next to no subtlety. The man's awareness level is somewhere in the negatives. He's so righteously dumb that he comes off as a buffed up Michael Scott, but minus the character's accidental likability and charisma. So more like Season 1 Michael Scott. John Cena is of course hilarious in this role, as he is in pretty much anything that he's given that's made for laughs. And he's made only funnier in the scenes that he shares with Bloodsport, where the two are constantly in a metaphoric measuring contest. And you know what? Knowing James Gunn, probably literally in a deleted scene that we didn't get to see.
No one likes to show off.
Unless what they're showing off is dope as fuck.
Fuck. That's true.
Even when I didn't like John Cena as a wrestler, I still always loved the guy as an entertainer. When he's given something comedic to work with, the guy's fantastic. And in my opinion, I think he has the potential to be every bit of a star that former WrestleMania opponent The Rock was. Well, is. It is probably always going to be. John Cena radiates talent. He was hilarious in the role, and he's the perfect heel here. He's a legitimate threat to all of those around him. But even in saying that, he can still be the butt of the joke, and very often, he is. He excels in both aspects of the character, and at no point does the duality of the role feel conflicting. It's like, yeah, he's real scary, but, he's also a f***ing idiot. So, if Biff from Back to the Future was a patriot, that is Peacemaker. Polka-Dot Man is played by the guy who's made basically a career off of being in superhero projects. David Dastmalchian. I'm not even going to act like I pronounced the name. I'm not even going to lie to you. That's insulting. I have no idea. And you know what? While I may not know this man's name, I know his face. The guy has been in everything from The Dark Knight, to Gotham, to The Flash, to Ant-Man. And I think what's especially funny is that he recently portrayed Calendar Man in Batman The Long Halloween. And here, Calendar Man, now played by James Gunn's brother, completely berates him. When Calendar Man is calling you a you probably know where you are on the villain tier list.
You're the lowest of the low.
Yeah, the lowest of the low.
Let me say now though, I think this is some of his best work, and he perfectly plays the social awkwardness and otherwise strangeness of this character. The man feels completely in his element, playing a character completely out of his element. I think Polka-Dot Man may be the most interesting of the bunch. What with his need to expel polka dots twice a day or be eaten alive by them, and his very severe mommy issues. Every scene with this weirdo of circumstance is strangely engaging. Ratcatcher 2 is really the heart of this movie, which is a sentence I didn't even know I was capable of saying.
Those words, is it possible to use them in a sentence together like that?
I think out of all the characters, Ratcatcher 2 comes off as the most human, which is saying something for somebody who spends all their time associating with rats. She's vulnerable at times, but she also takes action. And despite being an alleged villain, she has the heart, and also the tragic backstory, of a hero. Also, shout out to Tiger with Titties, who played Ratcatcher 1 in flashbacks. That is yet another guy who's made a career off of being in superhero movies. All in all, Ratcatcher 2 is the character you feel the most for in the squad. Her dynamic with Bloodsport plays a huge role in his turn for the better. And do I even need to mention how adorable Sebastian the Rat was? It's redundant to go into any further explanation. You can't help but awe whenever he's on screen. Give that CGI rat an Oscar. And speaking of CGI creatures, King Shark really serves as the Groot of the Suicide Squad. The sole giant animated character played by a big action star who has very few lines in the movie, usually serves as the comedic relief, and is the most beloved part of the movie in spite of, or maybe even because of all that. However, unlike Groot, this creature is a bloodthirsty kaiju. You're not going to see the talking tree tear through a man like he was ripping through a piece of paper, but you will get that here. The character has what are easily both the funniest moments in the movie and the most violent moments in the movie. The villains of the movie are the Thinker, a Maltesian general, and their president. And the movie deals with them in a pretty different manner. Having their president try to gaslight Harley into marriage, only to have her turn on him last minute and kill him off halfway through the movie? This is far from the standard. Alright, we saved the baddie for the finale and we beat him in some grandiose, epic way. Harley just took out a Glock and did the job whenever she felt like doing it. This movie not only goes against the formula of comic book movies, but it kind of abandons it entirely. And I think that's what I love so much about it. It's not a by-the-numbers comic book movie. It's subverting your expectation and trying new things. And these new things don't suck. That's the key, Ryan Johnson. The new things have to not suck in order for us to applaud you. I really enjoy the character of the Thinker because it answers the question, what if Brainiac was a pervert? I don't know how, but this movie somehow managed to make Doctor Who an unlikable dick. Well, then again, I guess Doctor Who did that themselves as well, but this character is what Quagmire would be like had he not been written as one of the characters you're supposed to cheer for. The guy gets a few funny quips and tidbits about what a deviant he is, but there's also a dark moment or two that gets completely glossed over and disregarded. He plays a good baddie, and his ending feels very, very fitting and completely earned. Won't be crying for you, Argentina. The General becomes the big bad for a brief second, but then he takes a backseat to the monster he's looking to unleash. Starro the Conqueror. The villain might have been a shock for many to see, especially if you're familiar with the backstory. Because Starro the Conqueror isn't exactly a character that gets a whole lot of love in modern comics. I mean, neither does Polka-Dot Man, so I guess it's in good company. What makes his appearance here so special is that he fits the tone and overall weirdness that this movie brings. A giant one-eyed starfish from outer space that reproduces from its armpits? Come on now, that has James Gunn written all over that. You didn't even have to tell me he was in charge of this. I would have figured it out by that context clue. Project Starfish, as it's referred to here, was actually the very first villain the Justice League ever went up against. So yeah, it has its place in history. I love it here. Everything from its design to how well it fits with the movie, it's just the perfect blend. And this is probably the only time anyone will ever give a fuck about it. So, you know, it's nice to see a hardworking starfish get their due. You know, how many famous starfishes do you know about? Got Patrick, that's it. Starro, you get your roast. To me, I think this movie succeeded where the first one failed miserably. This movie tells the origins and backstories of each of its leads, but it does so in a much more natural manner. Through conversation and dialogue, the movie tells us how these characters got to where they are. You know, as opposed to being given the Spark Note edition 5 minutes into the movie, with one character just casually explaining someone else's backstory to another character that serves very little relevance outside of updating the audience as to what it is they're watching. The movie succeeds in really selling the dysfunctional dynamic within the ranks of Task Force X. In 2 hours, friendships are made and broken, rivalries are made and then put to rest, and most importantly, this team bonds. In a lot of ways, these characters all feel like outcasts. And bringing them together, it's almost like watching a live-action Land of the Misfit Toys. I love the action scenes, and they're some of my favorite in all of the DCEU. But for me personally, the scenes just in which these characters are interacting and goofing off and having fun and bullshitting, talking about their lives, those are probably my favorite in all of the movie. Also, when it comes to the cinematography in this movie, there's a lot of shots that I'm honestly just kind of taken back and astounded by. I think too often in superhero movies, things just kind of feel like a point and shoot. And in the case of a fight scene, a point and shake. If I can't see what's going on, I can't really critique you, right? That's how that works. But here, there's some really interesting and entertaining cinematography that not only helps keep me engaged, but also makes me admire the work that was put into this. I really like how this movie doesn't take itself seriously, but the characters in the movie do. As objectively ridiculous as characters like Polka-Dot Man and the Detachable Kid are, the movie still presents its story with an abundance of death and the promise of more. At the same time, the movie isn't shy about its own goofiness, but it doesn't feel the need to address it constantly either. Everything about this movie just feels like it was done right. They put the right guy in charge, they brought the right people back from the last movie, they added just the right people to the already existing cast, they had the right script, they had the right story, they even had the right effects. It was just right. Now that's not to say I don't have some minor gripes with it. The music doesn't work for me in the conflicting yet somehow satisfying way that I think it wants to. Where the soundtrack for Guardians 1 and 2 works perfectly for those films, I don't think this one is as effective here. At least not all the time. There's some songs that fit nicely, but then there's others that just don't seem to work. Again, just from my perspective. Some of the usage of special effects kinda seem like the definition of style over substance. Like Harley's bullets turning into flowers? What was that? I mean, who was that for? What was the reasoning? But even in saying that, there's significantly less inappropriate music and awful unneeded special effects used here than used in the original, so still an upgrade. All in all, I highly recommend everyone watch this movie. If you like the original Suicide Squad, if you hated the original Suicide Squad, if you love the DCEU, if you hate the DCEU, if you like Guardians of the Galaxy,
if you like pina colada,
watch this movie. It is so different from anything that's come before in this universe, and, you know, if James Gunn isn't staying on, probably significantly different than anything that will follow it. Overall, I really enjoyed it, and I've watched it all of 3 times now. But feel free to tell me in the comments section whether you did or not. But with all that being said, I was your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso, and I thank you for watching. Hope to see you in the next one. And if you guys made it this far in the video, then comment Chocolate Starro and the Harley Quinn flavored bathwater.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.
And if you guys made it this far in the video, then comment Chocolate Starro and the Harley Quinn flavored bathwater.
Wow, you just plucking all my jokes, isn't it?
Plucking all your
Plucking
jokes.
all my
You added
jokes.
the word bath.
It changes the whole joke.